How would you rate your country? 3/10 Philippines. I came from an upper middle class background, so I actually got off easy compared to a lot of people, but I've still experienced and heard about a lot of awful things. I grew up in the Manila region and it's a shithole. The president is a piece of shit and didn't take the pandemic seriously, even when it was killing tons of people. His propaganda machine is so effective that a lot of people still worship him in this weird cult-like manner. His cronies won in the 2019 midterm elections, so it's just him and a bunch of idiots in charge. The last hope is the 2022 presidential election, but going by the 2019 results, I don't count on people making smart decisions. Fucking Manny Pacquiao could become the next president. Are you a millennial or a younger generation by any chance? The reason I ask is my Filipino friends' parents are pretty big fans of Duterte, and a lot of their family members and friends of their generation like Duterte due to his tough on-crime policies and allowing their law enforcement to conduct actions without repercussions. They were saying people in the Philippines love Duterte like people here like Trump. 2/10 South Africa. There is so much corruption that money never gets to where it needs to be, not even in a pandemic. We somehow have politicians that hold rallies in which they say shoot the Boer, shoot the white farmer, and don't get arrested for hate crimes. Crime like carjackings are done with coordinated squads armed with AK-47s and the like. They are making it harder and harder for the younger generations to get internationally recognized qualifications. American here. Some of my best friends are South African, white, farmers who come here and run the farms. Incredibly talented. My closest buddy manages a 10,000-acre wheat farm and does all the equipment maintenance, accounting and day-to-day operations himself. My experience is that South African farmers are one talented group. 3/10 Racist and corrupted piece of shit country, announced that PM were hospitalized for diarrhea. They probably have had pancreatic cancer and our PM is like 70+ years old, but hey, at least we don't have natural disasters, we are diverse and have very good food and scenery. Edit, it's Malaysia. 7/10 South Korea. The education hype is crazy as ever. Home prices are rocketing while some of the gov's policies are quite debatable. And SK keeps getting sort of picked on by certain nations. But it is a trendy country with a fast internet, and I love how accessible Wi-Fi is. A tech-savvy country where Samsung and LG is based in, and the healthcare is cheap. I've seen many Korean immigrants US book a flight to SK for a cheaper surgery. Also, SK has one of the best food, especially street food, so that's definitely a plus. Oh, and the Korean alphabet is super simple and beautiful, not to mention scientific. It can express every sound with extreme simplicity. SK has its faults, but it is a country that was nobly fought for by Admiral Yi, who led one of the greatest battles in Navy, winning with 13 ships against 133. It is a nation set free by brave independence activists, and managed to escape the IMF crisis. It managed to grow from a wrecked nation in 1950, the Korean War, to where we are now. Pretty proud of it. I lived in South Korea for years. Studied in Suwon and worked in Gimpo. I remember getting my finger damn near cut off when the gate to our home broke off and I tried to catch it. I made it 10 feet before some random lady took me to the hospital. I think I was all sewn up for what? 50K1? It was crazy cheap. They wanted me to stay the night and instead I just went back the next morning. I worked in Shenzhen, China for my last company. China is just a clusterfuck compared to SK. There is a great courses lecture on this battle. The course is called The Most Decisive Battles of World History and it's like the 19th lecture. I actually am a huge history nerd and finished it pretty fast. Super interesting. Goes into well-known and less well-known battles found from ancient times to WW2 and all around the world, not just focused on Western countries. I highly recommend it. The same professor actually has another called Biggest Military Blunders, which is awesome as well. Yeah, but I read in a recent issue of The Economist that many countries are now moving away from the NPTBSG, normalized public transport bitches and seat gum, index nowadays and are now focusing more on healthcare, education, poverty rates and political freedoms. Mad, I know. North Korea, 9/10. Gum-to-bus seat ratio is one of the lowest in the world, but lose a point for the oppression, famine and state-sponsored murder. 7/10. I live in the Netherlands and economically we are doing pretty good. I even think we have one of the smallest homeless population on earth, but recently some corruption in our government has been publicly exposed. This was so big that our cabinet had to step down, and then like 2 months later when the elections were coming, we elected the same fucking people. So that's some points deducted. Also, I live in Amsterdam and I don't know a single person that also lives here and hasn't been robbed, but that might just be a problem with the west side of Amsterdam. I'm going to do too because I grew up partly in the US and partly in Mexico. USA 8/10. The US has lots of problems, mainly that the country is basically split into two with both sides hating the other. But other than that, it's a really nice place. Infrastructure is outstanding and quiet. The US is extremely by the book. You break a law, you get fined or go to jail. You can't bribe a police officer into excusing you. Overall great place. Mexico 6/5 or 7/10. Mexico gets a bad rap from the media, which may have been justified in the 90s and early 2000s, but now it's more laid back today. Now yes, of course the cartel is still there and extremely powerful. However, unless you're walking down an alleyway in Sinaloa at 2 in the morning or you're not talking shit about the cartel, you'll be fine. Infrastructure is okay. Some parts are really bad and some parts on par with the US. Unlike the U.S., Mexico's law is very laid back. You don't need a permit to set up shop in front of your local OXXO. If the police gives you a ticket, you can bribe them and they'll most likely accept. Albeit the police is being replaced by the military. Culture is a place Mexico really shines. It is a country of several ethnic groups and people, with each area telling a story. 10/10. Slovenia, super safe, no criminal, fresh air, clean water, clean streets, no crowd in the biggest cities, beautiful nature, good standard of living but still prices are not too high, nice, friendly people, a country of diversity, good food, no extreme weather, natural disasters, great weather climate, no stray animals on the streets, health and school system works, level of English is amazingly high, everyone is welcome here. Yep, I'd say that's about right. High functioning democracy, rule of law, high standard of living, for almost all, excellent universal healthcare, mostly amazing climate and stunning natural beauty, generally nice friendly people, low crime, pretty decent infrastructure, arts, culture, food, marred somewhat by some pretty fucked up issues with the treatment of our indigenous brothers and sisters, abhorrent attitude to refugees, both of which result from an undercurrent of pretty broadly prevalent racism, and a pathetic response to the climate crisis. 2/10. Brazil, we showed great promise in the first decade of the 2000s, with people having more access to education, housing, electricity, social indexes getting better, but especially after a recent coup, we've descended into a pseudo-fascist theocratic regime, with austerity bringing back extreme poverty and hunger, at the same time defunding healthcare, education, science and other essential areas. The good sides are what we still have in terms of a free and universal healthcare system, with all its flaws and needs of improvement, our free and top-notch public universities and our natural beauty. Malaysia 10/10. I've been to probably about 100 countries and lived in Malaysia for the last 2. I can't speak to how it is for natives, but for me, I love it. The food is off the charts and cheap enough that I can eat out every meal on a teacher's salary, beautiful beaches, great mountains, etc. The only parts I don't like are 1. They use too much plastic and 2. The driving isn't great. You should visit. As a dual national that has lived in both in the last few years, I'll score both. 3/10. Britain. So much going for us in terms of landscape, culture and positive historical impact, workers' rights, NHS, political reformers, but unquestionably will elect the biggest pricks possible to ruin everything based on how many of our problems they can blame on everyone else and how much they glorify the crimes of our nation's past. Alarming obesity rate, which is hugely noticeable when compared with their closest neighbors. 6/10 Ireland, friendly, welcoming culture and get along with pretty much every other country going. Fascinating history and stunning landscape. Also need to elect a better government, improve our healthcare and move more to renewable energy. -2/10 for me, dumb conservatives, ignorant liberals, uneducated politicians, arresting people for questioning the government, lack of infrastructure, not safe even for guys, bad roads, overpopulation, attacking and threatening you if you mention any problem with the country, boast about the past while doing nothing for the future. Rich people can do anything and happily get away with it. Passive-aggressive people trying to pick a fight on the street, fuck this country. 6/7 U.S., it can be hard to make a living. Things keep getting expensive despite wages not being great. Politics is a bit frustrating because even when one political party has control they don't get anything done and both parties engage in sketchy shit to make sure they keep control or make the other party looks bad. I am sure it is worse other places, but I have to imagine that there are places to live where life isn't quite as stressful. My biggest concern with our country is the amazing lack of will people have for progression. Half the country thinks America was great in the past and wants to regress to that, MAGA. It's somehow a partisan thing to want to have meaningful change for our future. Better education, gun reform, police reform, climate control, improved infrastructure. Why are all of these things so divisive? 7/10 Portugal. Great weather, great food, very peaceful, stable and safe. Chill culture, good infrastructure, good location. Economy, taxes, bureaucracy, job market are totally shit though. People are nice and friendly overall, but quite ignorant, uneducated. 10/10 If you're rich and live of investments. If the salaries and tax system here were like the US, Portugal would be one of the best countries in the world to live in. Easy. 8/10 US, we certainly have our issues, but there's no place like it. Smile. Happy birthday America. Healthcare and higher education need a major overhaul. Political polarization and the widening income, wealth gap are terrifying. But social mobility is real, though we definitely need to be better at it. Economy is humming along nicely, and we somehow seem to get shit done, eventually. Proud as hell of the red, white, and blue. Edit, America. A solid 7/5 Canada. We have some problems with province leaders. Quebec and Ontario are ran by absolute buffoons. Also the Canadian government seems to be helping Quebec separate, which is something that only the French boomers want, yet they are in power. In Quebec, the only one I count because I'm from there, votes aren't weighted based on population. They're weighted based on who will maintain the status quo. Trudeau is a decent PM but focuses too much on virtue signaling. He says more than he does. But overall, we have good healthcare, we handled COVID okay, and we have some good environmental initiatives. We also legalized weed so we can stop arresting people for basically nothing. 7/10 Canada. Like the stereotypes insist Canadians truly are as friendly as you think they are. I've seen more random people let hobos into their cars than I have in my entire life. Watch out for the geese though, they can get very violent. Hey, keep your distance. Plus we got maple syrup, poutine, free healthcare, hockey, and our stereotypes rock. Canada 7/10. It's such a large country so kinda hard to give the entire thing a rating, but based on what I've seen I think this is fair. Healthcare system is good, but because it's public you can't expect to wait 5+ hours in the waiting room just to wait another 1-2 hours to be seen by a doctor in the ER. Obviously if you were bleeding out you'd get seen right away. In major cities there is so much diversity, it's beautiful. Every day of the week for every meal you can have a cuisine from a different country. Many cities often have events celebrating countries and regions. This gives people loads of exposure to a culture they probably have never experienced or never would living somewhere else. Homelessness is a big issue in major cities right now, and the pandemic has made it even worse. People camp out in parks and city staff are ordered to evict these people. It's sad. Where are they expected to go? The shelters are all at a limited capacity. Education. Personally, I think we are extremely behind. I've had friends that immigrated from countries like Portugal, China, South Korea, Mauritius, all to find out that the math we are learning in the 11th grade is something they have already accomplished in the 7th grade. Also would like to mention that post-secondary school is extremely costly. In Ontario you're looking at spending at least $7,500 Canadian dollars a year for just tuition at a university. That doesn't include the cost of books and learning materials. The Ontario government has cut a lot of grants that students can receive to offset these costs. Also, if you're a foreign student, expect to pay nearly 3x as much as a domestic student. The treatment of Indigenous people is heartbreaking. It's made national news that over 1,000 bodies have been found in several sites of residential schools. These schools were run primarily by the Catholic Church and forced Native children to attend. They were mistreated, abused, were experimented on, and now there is hard evidence that they were murdered and dumped into mass graves. This wasn't even that long ago. The last residential school closed sometime around 1996. Thousands of natives are still considered missing. Want to also mention that the government doesn't do much to help their communities, as there are many of them that don't have access to clean drinking water. Imagine claiming to be one of the best countries to live in, but your people still have to boil water to use it. Select small communities. I'll wrap it up here. I love my country. It is so beautiful and so diverse, but don't be fooled. Canada isn't as nice as they claim to be. I also agree that it's too big to fit in one rating. It's good, and probably compared to a lot of places it's great, but there are still lots of issues under the surface. We have lead issues in our water systems. Access to healthcare can be a challenge. And even though this is a country founded by immigrants since the beginning, there's quite a bit of racism. On the flip side, you can find beauty and amazing places coast to coast, and while our political system has its issues, it doesn't seem to be nearly as bad as what's happening south of the border. Similar to the US, the PR team here does a pretty good job of keeping some of the ugly under wraps. Regarding your point about education, first and foremost, I think it's a way to weed out people, as those countries tend to pay for your education. They don't have a lot of money. With that being said, I had a friend from Poland who mentioned to me that she did calculus in high school and junior high, which I found mind-blowing. However, when I showed her my university calculus homework, she said it was a lot more difficult than what she had. 8/10 USA. We have problems. On a world scale, the problems seem like it's the only way of life, but here on the ground life isn't bad. We have so many places to visit and enjoy throughout the year, and so many different types of people to learn about and befriend. The Great Lakes in the summer is the best place I can think to be, and wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I have no desire to leave or move, and to me that is a good thing. I am a U.S. citizen and I don't like living in the USA. I work full-time at Walmart. I can't afford health insurance and have had diabetes since age 3 and extreme anemia. Almost all my money goes on insulin and trying to find a doctor that will let me have a prescription without making me pay for another referral to another expensive doctor, and lot of unnecessary super expensive tests every 6 months. I can't get a different job because I'm exhausted all the time and my neck is barely above water. I think if you have a job with healthcare, then life here would feel a lot better. The bizarre thing is, if I were to quit my job, then I could get help, but I'm trying to keep working full-time and pay my taxes, but I feel I'm about to die soon and I'm still young. 6. 5/10 in India. It is actually quite safe, but the population ruins it all. This one problem gives rise to even more smaller problems, like the country is developing very slowly because the government is just trying to provide to the entire population of 1.4 billion and doesn't have any time to develop the country in any other region. The only time education system is brought up when we joke about it. Many people are racist. I really want to move out as a student. But otherwise, if you get a high salary job as adult, it's not a bad place at all.